Well, darling, there's only one God. Darling, there's only.
Welcome to the Dirty Bag Podcast. I'm your host, Cookie, and I have an excellent guest today. We got Ashley. And first off, I got to tell y'all, this podcast is talking about Black girls with anxiety because Ashley is the host of Black Girls Have Anxiety Too, the mess that we just went through to get this going.
I know. It's okay. We're here though. We made it.
But we made it.
We didn't need IT. We made it.
Ashley is IT. So outside of IT, I'm gonna let her introduce herself.
Hey y'all, my name is Ashley. I am the host of a podcast called Black Girls Have Anxiety Too. It's a podcast focused on mental health and wellness, specifically for Black women. We focus on destigmatizing conversations around mental health within our community and kind of stripping away the taboo of talking about things like anxiety and depression. So we don't just talk about anxiety, we talk about a little bit of everything in the whole mental health world. And we have psychologists, psychiatrists, all the mental health practitioners come on in. They're all Black women that come on and talk about a certain subject, but we also have women that come and tell their story and their own journeys about their own mental health. So I feel you when I know your anxiety has been high as we lead up to this episode.
What is going on?
It's okay. If anybody's going to have compassion for you, it's going to be me.
It's like, I think because of the topic matter, we get tested. You can't say you about something and not get tested on it. So there is some crazy shit that happens when me and Ash try to come together. It's like, let's see if y'all really about this. So
well, we passed.
We did. But what made you want to start a podcast like this?
Yeah. So 2020, that's probably the main answer.
Well,
2020 happened and man, it was probably like a month after, it was about a month and a half after George Floyd was murdered. And my friend and I were on the phone, and I'd always wanted to start a podcast, and we had kind of talked a little bit about like maybe we should like record our conversations because we always go deep whenever we talk. And we were just both very anxious and very stressed out, like all of us were at that time. We were like, man, we need a space. We need somewhere where we can talk about it. And right now, like, nobody's really focusing on Black women, although a lot of times the work is kind of put in our hands. And she said, Black girls have anxiety too, and people need to know that. And I was like, bam, that's it. Let's run with it. And so shout out to Aloria. She's no longer my co-host as of early last year, but she is a fan from afar. She's still a cheerleader, still a good friend. But our businesses are booming right now, so she took a setback. So it's just been me, but still talking to a lot of mental health professionals and still just having Black women come on and share. And that's kind of 2020 really just, we were all isolated, and so I was looking for meaningful conversations and also didn't want to feel so alone in my own anxiety.
Right.
So the podcast has just like kind of taken off from there.
And I would ask with that, when you having your own battles, but you're creating content around these battles, like, does it ever get overwhelming? Like, all right, I can't talk about this today because I'm feeling XYZ. Like, has anxiety ever interrupted your creative flow?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely say yes. I think there are a lot of times, and I try to tell my guests that I'm creating a space for you. I'm kind of opening up the space and trying to put the focus on you. And of course, I want to share, and I'm trying to get better at sharing more of myself. But there's definitely been a couple episodes where I'm like, I could share this right now, but I don't know. I might start crying. Maybe I should share that stuff. But, there's some days where I'm like, I'm going to really focus on the guest and let them tell their story. And then there's some days where I'm like, okay, I feel comfortable today. I'm going to just like share my own journey, share little pieces of my own journey. So it kind of just depends. But I try to push myself to share because that's the whole point of the podcast, but it's outside of my comfort zone. So I've got to keep pushing myself to get there because I feel like that's when really powerful conversations come out. Because like when I share, usually like it invites my guests to share a little bit more. And so the conversation kind of like flowers into something that I didn't really really planned for, which is beautiful.
And I find that interesting that people wouldn't look at that as like the number one thing to hold space for people is sharing your stories first, because everybody doesn't do that. So with something so intimate and something that just is crippling the Black women, because we don't talk about anxiety.
Mm-mm.
And we never have a space for it because we're too busy trying to save everybody else. And you bringing up George Floyd, like I learned I had anxiety with Mike Brown. I was out there in the streets. And what's crazy is I did a podcast earlier this week. I probably should have said no to it. And it was from an organization that I was a part of in Ferguson. And they were basically asking me to revisit my experiences from being in the org during that time. Now, that type of trauma was the furthest thing from my mind. It wasn't something I wanted to talk about. I said yes. I did this interview. When I tell you I was fighting back tears on the Zoom, and I got off and I had this horrible anxiety attack. I ended up having to call one of my frontline sisters who understood it. And she works, in the hospital. So she ran off the floor thinking something was wrong with me, like somebody did something. But I was just like, no, like I don't know, like I didn't think these things bothered me anymore. So triggers, like how do you deal with things that trigger your anxiety?
I think for me, it's been the biggest thing for me has been understanding my triggers. And, like you said, conversations. And this is something early on in the podcast that my old co-host, and I used to talk about before we get on the episode. It's like, okay, what do we want to get into today? And at that time, I won't get too deep into it today, but there was just a lot, what I felt like was like Black trauma porn of just like violence, constant, like on timelines, on news screens. It was just like inescapable almost. And then we also kind of felt kind of bad not watching it. And so during that year, I realized that was a huge trigger for me, in that I don't necessarily have to make myself watch every video. To this day, I've not watched the full 8 minutes.
I can't. I wish I
refuse to. And it's like something I got to do to protect my energy. I know it happened, and I know that other people can sit there and watch it over and over again. Like I can't do that to myself, because I will literally have nightmares. I get really bad anxiety. So for me, it's understanding my triggers, understanding, triggers from like, okay, is work really stressing me out? Like, what can I do to step away? Relationships, like people close to me, if those relationships start to get rocky, or if I feel like there's conflict, that will like make my anxiety raise. So it's like, for me, it's been really exploring and trying to understand, like, where are my triggers coming from? And once I actually understand the triggers, then I can start to address them.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes we don't take that time. We just know that I'm uncomfortable. I'm freaking out. I can't sleep. I don't know why. And you're right. Trauma porn is a huge thing. But you know what's crazy about that? As much as we deal with anxiety, all of us, especially as Black people, some people find their worth in chaos. I saw so many activists who cannot, I ain't gonna say they couldn't wait, but the minute there was another officer involved shooting or something, they like rushed. It was what we call ambulance chasing. So running to it because they got to play the hero. So some people use things that cause anxiety as the way to elevate themselves. I guess I understood it for a while, but now I'm like, bruh.
Yeah, I think
a
lot of people. Yeah, I think part of it was a lot of people trying to validate themselves, and I don't know if it was like a malicious thing to do, because I think it was at that I felt a lot of guilt because I wasn't outside with everybody else.
Oh, you saved yourself. If you got anxiety now, honey.
Yeah, well, it's so crazy because it was like a time in June, and I was living in Miami at the time, and I was I talked to my husband, and I was like, man, I really want to go out there. I really want to be out there. Like, and it was, I think the next day it had come out that, man, I don't want to get too deep into this, but there was a lot of violence at the protests. I don't want to like re-trigger either of us in this moment, but
I've been out there. I know what goes down.
Yeah, it was a lot. Like a girl had lost her eye because of the violence at the protest from the police there.
Oh yeah.
I have like a really weird, rare lung condition, and so I was also kind of going back and forth with like, how do I protest without necessarily being there physically? And that was another reason why when we came up with Black Girls Have Anxiety Too, we were kind of like, okay, this is our form of protest. Like, yeah, we're not out there, but I know the exhaustion that all of us are feeling. And for anybody that is out there, I can only imagine the anxiety that you're feeling, the depression that you're feeling, the feeling of just not being safe. Like, I feel like we just need a space, even if it's like you go, sit in your living room with headphones on and you listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
Like that is to me a safe space.
Because nobody had a sense of normalcy. So, I mean, hell, I wish there was a Black Girls Have Anxiety Too when I was out there.
Yeah.
Because when you're around a bunch of people that are traumatized and, or battling it, none of us can be a safe space for each other. We empathize, we sympathize with each other because we all in the same stuff. But like little things, like I remember for a long time, 4th of July, fireworks freak me out. It sounds like tear gas. Fireworks sound exactly like tear gas. And even ambulance going by, like there's certain noises that used to just, I would lose it. I think in the past 3 years is the first time those things don't bother me, but I never had a place to talk about it because regular everyday people that don't acknowledge anxiety or that weren't involved would be like, I don't get it. It's fireworks. I don't get it. Why are you? So yeah. And if somebody were to ask, let's just say someone says, I don't really understand what anxiety is. How would you describe it to somebody that's trying to figure out this is what they have, or this is what they've experienced?
Yeah, sure. So the way I explain it, the way I explain it to somebody is like you're driving in your car, right? And there's that moment where, let's say you're driving on the freeway, you're going like 80 miles an hour, you're in the fast lane, like life is good, everybody's moving smoothly. And all of a sudden you see the car, 3 cars in front of you slam to a brake. All the cars in front of you go red. And now 2 cars in front of you slams to the brake. Your body is going into like, oh my gosh, I need to protect myself. I need to slam into the brakes, right? That's a healthy form of anxiety. That's your body protecting itself. That's your body choosing to either fight, flight, or now they've added freeze. So in that moment, you're going to brake, you're going to like grab the person in the passenger seat and brace them back and push them back into their chair.
That's a good way.
And then at the end of that, you're going to, okay, I'm good. And now your body knows, okay, it's safe. That's healthy anxiety. So that's something that everybody has, and like it's necessary for survival. When anxiety gets to the point for me where my body is not doing it when it's trying to protect me, it thinks it's trying to protect me, but it's having that same reaction for things that don't warrant that reaction. So
got it.
Things like I'm trying to think of an example that makes me stressed out or like makes me really anxious. Money is one that to me doesn't warrant. It was just me. No, it's me too. It's a whole lot of us, but it's one that doesn't warrant this reaction of my body thinking it needs to do this and clench up and like tighten my jaw and like make my heart race, because it's not a survival thing, but my body, unfortunately, like my nervous system is all out of whack. And anxiety, when it comes to like general anxiety disorders, it's your body having that same like break reaction all the time throughout the day. So then you like wear on your nervous system. But that's the way I would explain anxiety to somebody.
That's a good way to explain it. I think when people get so comfortable with anxiety, they don't understand, like I'm one of them waiting for the other shoe to drop people. This is not healthy at all.
Yeah.
But if I go a long time without dealing with any anxiety or getting triggered by something, I freak out. Mm-hmm. Like things are going good and it makes me uncomfortable because I'm so used to. Mm-hmm. I said, I don't think this is okay. Mm-hmm. At all.
And then you wait for like, I think the actual definition of anxiety is an impending doom. So it's like you're constantly waiting, like your stomach is constantly in a knot because something could happen.
Man.
And it could be like tomorrow. It could be in like 5 minutes. It
could
be
in 5 years. That just describes so much. That is really sad. That's a horrible way to live.
It is.
It's a horrible way to live.
I try to manage it as best as I can, but it is really, it's a lot, and it's a lot on your nervous system. It's a lot on your brain, most of all, but it sucks because your body gets used to reacting like that all the time. And then it's hard to kind of differentiate between I don't want to call it overreacting, but your body just starts to think that it's always in trouble. Like it's
Right.
always like in protection modes. So even when you're like relaxing, or even when like I'm doing yoga, sometimes I have to like physically tell myself, okay, breathe, like drop your shoulders. It's okay.
Yes.
Like all these other thoughts that are coming in your head right now are they're not affecting you in this moment. Like you don't have to think about them right now. You can think about them at the end of class. But that I was living like that until, I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, when I started like getting introduced to anxiety, because I didn't know what it was. I just thought this is how everybody lives. Then that's not the case.
Right. And I think that was that's funny about the shoulders. When I first started going to therapy, that was the first thing my therapist said is, girl, drop your shoulders. She said, stop playing in your hair. My hair was really short. I shaved it off and I had these little curls and I kept running my fingers through it. And she was like, you tense, you're running your fingers through your hair. And I was like, well, she was like, girl, you ain't even got that much hair. So what you keep rubbing it for? Like, she was like, what you doing? I didn't know. And one day she forced me to give her a hug, maybe a year later. Like, I guess I just unloaded so much. She could tell I needed it. And she hugged me. And I was just like this little timid, tense kid. Because even her getting me to talk about certain things that were causing anxiety, the fact that I was sharing it with another human being was causing me. Because I'm like, I'm strong. I keep people out of my business. Which is another reason you will have anxiety, because you ain't like you holding on to stuff, like you said.
And that's a big part of being a Black woman, and one of the biggest barriers to us actually getting help is that thought process of like, I'm strong. So we put this label of like, I'm strong. I can handle this because I'm supposed to, because I have no other choice but to handle this.
Right.
But also, I don't want people to know my business. Like, I can do this myself. And we've kind of like been raised like that for a long time. And part of that does come from survival. Part of that does come from the past hundreds of years having to survive, even to this day. But what I want, like what I hope that the podcast brings to people, brings to Black women, is that we don't have to be strong like all the time. And sometimes there's strength in being vulnerable. There's strength in saying like, okay, I got to go to a therapist. Like, I got to go see somebody. I got to go to a psychologist. I have to go to a psych ward. There is strength in all of that.
Yeah. I had a friend that went to one once. We've been broken down so bad, but we can't say it because then we got an attitude, or we too aggressive. And it's like, I never heard the word anxiety growing up. I never heard an adult in my family use that word. So we haven't even been introduced to language. Like, it's forbidden to us. So you can't have a space when folks can't even acknowledge, call a thing a thing.
Yeah. I mean, we've been told like since we were younger, don't talk back. You got an attitude, go to your room. And then when you fix it, you can come back downstairs. And there's so much that happens when we go to the room and we're sitting there stewing on stuff.
Yeah.
And we don't actually get to talk about it. And then, your mom or dad brings you something to eat and you're like, we're good now.
Food is always the way to parents. Black parents don't be apologizing. They just bring you a pork chop.
Yes. And if it's your favorite food, they're really sorry.
Come get the spaghetti, girl. You just jacked me up with that belt.
Right? Like, I'm in pain still. I can't sit down, but okay, I guess it's dinner time.
Right. But what can you go back to a moment where you was just like, you know what? This is a thing. This is a real trigger for me. I will never engage in this ever again, or I can't deal with this person ever again. Like, has there ever been a moment where a boundary just immediately got put down because you just knew what you knew?
Let me think.
Not making you go in the tank.
Yeah, man, I have to think about something that I put a hard no on. Man. I think that going back to what we were talking about earlier, I just don't watch the trauma porn anymore. That's a hard no for me. If I even like see it come up I'm more likely to see it pop up. I'm not gonna watch it, but I'll go and like read an article about it just to get the details. But that for me in the past couple years is a hard no. I like, do not send it. I had to tell a couple friends like, please stop sending me this. I can't do it. I was
just gonna say that. People tagging you in the trauma because they want to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah. And I'm like, I'm I'm in pain over here. Like, I am barely getting up to, I have a job and I'm barely getting up to do the job because I'm like depressed over here from being bombarded with all this.
Did
So
you ever call
please
in
stop.
black?
No. Ironically, I was working for, let's see, 2020, I was freelancing, and I was also working for a company that was in New Zealand where I used to live. And so that was interesting because they know nothing about that particular part of our culture when it comes to like police violence. And of course, at that time, the whole world is dealing with the pandemic. I would always joke with them, like, you guys are in paradise. At the time, there's no cases. Nobody could come in or out the country. And so life was good over there. And so it was, they were, I have to say, they were open to saying that they didn't understand, but that like if you need time, you can take time. But there's only so much time you want to take off, right?
I want to take all the time off.
Yeah, I mean, I need a solid month away from everything.
I had a therapist that figured out how to get me time. Y'all talk to y'all black therapists because they can fill out paperwork for you to be able to take time off. She felt that I had way too much trauma. I brought in the paperwork I needed to.
Yes.
And I was able to take a certain amount of days off, no questions asked from my boss.
Yeah, the FMLA is a real thing.
FMLA,
Yes.
save the day.
Yes. And people don't realize also, because I know one thing for me is I didn't know until I really started to dig into getting a therapist that there's also like sliding scales. So there are some therapists where you might go to the website and it says $130 a session. So you're like, no. But if it says sliding scale, that scale can sometimes slide all the way down. And that's really for people, if you're in a position where you can't pay that amount, call them, have a conversation, see what they can do, and they'll talk with you. I try to be mindful of like, okay, now I'm in a much better position. Like I can pay whatever the amount is. But at that time, I was like, how much? Hang up, click. How much? Click. Like I had to find somebody with a sliding scale, and that scale was slid all the way down to like $70 or something. But particularly Black women, Black therapists in general, like let them know you're in need. And if they can't help you, they're probably going to send you to somebody that can.
Yeah. Or if a Black therapist, especially a Black woman therapist, realize that you are so frazzled and just so broken, she might just say, girl, this is on me. Because that definitely happened once after I had a situation with a fuck boy, and I revisited with her because we literally did a couple session with her together. And I told her what this fool did, and I needed to talk to her because she was the one person that knew the most about him because of, the intake form.
Yeah. At
the end, I was like, so how do we do this? She was like, girl, I think she felt so bad for me. She was like, baby, this on the house.
Yeah.
Go heal.
Yeah. Shout out to all the black female therapists out there doing the thing. Y'all are doing the Lord's work right now, because I know 2020 ran y'all through the ringer, and then now we're in a weird space where mental health is finally something that we're starting to talk about. And I think particularly like Gen Z, millennials, we're finally starting to have like conversations and accepting like, okay, I'm not strong today. Okay, I went to therapy, and like kind of talking about it. There, with that comes an influx of more people needing more mental health support. And some of those people that look like us want to also see somebody that looks like them.
Yes.
I believe we only make up, Black therapists in general only make up about 4.5% of the total mental health practitioners and mental health providers.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. With Black women, it's even a smaller percentage. So there's also a very large weight that I feel like Black women are carrying, that are therapists and that are mental health providers, that are doing a lot of work right now and managing a lot. So that's one reason I really like to bring them on the podcast, because in my head, I thought, I can only talk to a therapist, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist. That's it. But in reality, there's licensed counselors, there's social workers that are able to do therapy. There are nurse practitioners that are specifically psychiatric nurse practitioners that you can go in and have a conversation with. There's a lot more resources than I think we realize. And so it's super important to know that.
Yeah. And I remember my therapist told me she had a therapist. She was like, there's no way for me to take all this on and I'm not getting help myself. Cause I'm like, baby, she earned her paycheck with me.
Mm-hmm. I
I
have an
came in with
episode
some
called
bullshit.
Therapists Have Therapists Too, because that has to be talked about. Therapists. If your therapist doesn't have a therapist, find a new therapist.
Cause ain't no way you can help me and you ain't taking care of your shit. Again, because everybody wants to be a therapist. We all want to help everybody. Baby, y'all are not equipped to do what it is y'all trying to do. Stop that. And then you go, I used to play the hood therapist. And then I'm like, I never saw my problems because I'm taking care of everybody. I used to get anxiety from listening to other people's problems that I volunteered to listen to. Now I will avoid phone calls because I get triggered by people doing wrong, getting done wrong, because I feel like it's me. So I felt this immense amount of pressure for years to be for people what I wanted somebody to be for me, which means I'm taking on your stuff and I'm feeling it. I know people hate that word empath, but I'm sensitive to folks' energies. So now he beat your ass. I'm thinking about him beating my ass. So now I want to beat his ass. And it just.
And now you're both carrying all of
Yeah.
this.
And people will let you carry it. Now I'm like, what I have is heavy. I don't think I should be putting this on somebody because I don't know that might cause anxiety for them. So it's being mindful of people around you and not dumping. We don't think anything of it, but I've never been one to dump on anybody. I've definitely been a suffer in silence person.
Yeah, same for sure. Like I've definitely been. I think I'm a little bit of a different type of friend where I was the friend that was like, dump all of your stuff on me because then I feel really good about helping you, but I don't want to give you any of my stuff because I feel like it'd be a burden. So there was like years where I just would never tell anybody about the stuff that I was going through. I would say honestly, my husband was the first person that I was open to the point of like, I started to tell him like, and it took a lot of him pulling it out of me early in our relationship for me to be open and honest with like the stuff I had been through, the stuff I was going through in that moment. But it wasn't until then where I felt like, oh, I have permission to like, I'm not a burden. Like I can actually talk a little bit about what I'm going through. But up until that point, I was taking everybody's stuff and I felt good about it because I'm like, okay. But then I would go home and be by myself and be like, damn, I'm still holding all this and I still feel like I can't share. But now I know everybody else's shit.
Right.
And so I can't go and take this to them when they're already dealing with, all this stuff.
Right. No, that's facts. And that's a horrible way to live. But
It
y'all,
is.
it is. But when you set them healthy boundaries, and again, setting healthy boundaries because you understand your triggers, it requires, have you noticed that it requires a time of isolation to kind of get to know yourself? Because that's what I figured out for me. Like I had to pull back and figure out what was going on so I knew how to address things properly.
Yeah. I think I do that to this day. Like I still there's periods where I need to kind of take a step back and ask myself, like, why am I doing these things? What am I doing that? Like, who am I doing them for?
Right.
Am I getting fulfilled? Or is this like I hate to say transactional, but like, if you're a really good friend to somebody, you want them to be a good friend back to you.
Yes.
And sometimes I got to take a step back and see, is this still a healthy relationship? Was this just for a season? Has the season ended?
Right.
And that's okay. If like, I want to grow. I want to be a different person next year than I was, a year ago. But when that happens, friendships come and go. Some stick around. Some people are growing too, and some people aren't. And so,
you will get anxiety holding on to things past their expiration date, especially people, because now you carrying some stuff you ain't got no business carrying. And now you got anxiety because you supposed to have left them at their last bus stop, but your last one to take them downtown with you.
Yes.
I agree with that. Definitely taking time to learn about you and your triggers and setting proper boundaries.
Yeah.
Like I should have did last week, but it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, being vocal about it is not an easy thing. It's definitely not an easy thing. It takes a lot because there's also there's that little bit of shame of like, do I say no and now I feel bad because I've said no because I feel like I owe them their time this time and or do I it's hard. But I think the other thing I just want to point out when it comes to triggers, sometimes there is no trigger for my anxiety. Like because I have this type of anxiety, sometimes my anxiety just goes through the roof for no reason. And like my husband will be like, why? Like, why? How come this is going on? And I'll be like, I don't know. Like, sometimes it's because of a particular trigger, and sometimes I'm just walking around the house and now I can't breathe, and now my hands are like clenched. And
it don't care what kind of day you having, it will show. It shows up when it wants to.
Yeah, I was telling somebody the other day, anxiety, when it has gone outside of the realm of just helping you survive, is like a nosy neighbor that keeps showing up.
Oh my God.
She just keeps showing up. She just keeps knocking on your door. Like, you just got home from work and she's banging on your door. Hey, and like
doing?
looking through your window, and you're like, go away.
Just thought I'd check on you.
Yes. Now she's at the back door, knocking on the door. Hey, can I come in? And it's like, she's there with all good intentions, but she's really pissing you off because you don't need her. Your house is not on fire. You only need her if your house is on fire.
I never thought about it like that.
Like, she's a really nice person, but go home.
I ain't calling anxiety on some bullshit. Anxiety is fake. That's that fake ass person that be checking in on you. Fake as hell. You like that fake friend.
You keep coming around.
It's a fake friend. Well, I'm gonna tell y'all now, we're gonna be revisiting this so much because I think it's so many layers and so many different things happening in the world where, especially as Black women, we will need to come back to this conversation and see how we doing. So y'all know y'all gonna get a part 2 and part 3, right? So just so we're clear, but you got to tell everybody how to find you.
Yes, for sure. You can find me wherever you listen to podcasts. That's Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all those good stuff. It's Black Girls Have Anxiety 2 with 2 O's. I'm also on Instagram at Black Girls Have Anxiety 2. I'm on TikTok. Finally get some content out on TikTok. Same at Black Girls Have Anxiety 2. And then I'm on Twitter.
Challenge.
Well, yeah, I'm not dancing, but it's content. I'm on Twitter at Anxious Black Girl. That's BLK at Anxious Black Girl on Twitter. And I'm on Bullhorn. You can listen to live episodes on Bullhorn. Just type in Black Girls Have Anxiety 2 and give us a follow.
Boom. So at this point, you have a home for the things you deal with. There are resources out here, or there's just a safe space for you to listen and be like, you know what? That's me. And it's all good. And it is what it is. We're human, and give yourself grace. So that is the hope, that you guys follow her, listen to the episodes, and give yourself grace and be seen and be heard. So I got to thank you, sis, for coming on and being my IT.
Anytime, girl. Just call me. Don't call them. Call me.
Trust Black women.
Yes, we got each other.
In all ways. Always. At this point, I don't really know what we in no more. We still in a thing. So where applicable, wear your mask, wash your hands, socially distance. And when you get a free moment, please remember to clean out your dirty bag. Till next time.
Well, darling, there's only one God.